From Canada, Citizens Forum, where we look at the important issues of the day through a lens of democracy and media and try to figure out, how do we build a better country for ourselves? Hello, welcome to From Canada Citizens Forum. It is Saturday, May the 17th, 2025. My name is Jack Etkin. I'm in Victoria, where it's a bit rainy and wet, so it's cold. My guest is Alex. I don't even know quite how to pronounce your last name. Alex Tyrrell?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, good enough. Alex is the leader, and has been for quite a while, of the Green Party of Quebec, or the Quebec Green Party. And we're going to be talking about the Green Party, his recent trip to China, and then a little bit about this current situation in Canada. So, Alex, welcome, and maybe you can just say a few words about how you got to where you are.
Yeah, sure. So that's it. My name is Alex Tyrrell. I'm the leader of the Green Party of Quebec. I got that position at age 25 back in 2013. I had been involved in politics a little bit before with the NDP under Jack Layton and the Orange Wave that we had in Quebec back in 2011. But I changed to the Green Party because I really want to pursue ideological politics, uncompromising left-wing politics. And so under my leadership, the Green Party of Quebec has adopted an eco-socialist platform. We've been a very outspoken voice against racism and social inequality. And we've also managed to try and push the Green Party of Canada a little bit to the left. And we really represent the left of the Canadian Green Party movement. So that's a bit about my background.
So can you just say something about eco-socialism?
Sure. So eco-socialism is a question of taking care of the environment, but also the population at the same time, making sure that everybody has access to quality public health care and education, and a strong social safety net is also something that's very important. So it's really the combining of environmentalism and socialist economic and social policy.
Yeah, that's sort of where my politics are at as well.
Good, perfect.
Yeah. And I think it can work. But in this country, we can't give it a try because the corporations seem to control everything, and eco-socialism are two things that they absolutely do not want, and they control our governments, I think, and they own the media. So people like us are in trouble before we even get started. So you mentioned a need for renewal in the Green Party of Canada.
Yeah. Yeah, so basically myself and some other people, we've been calling for a renewal of the Green Party of Canada, particularly at the leadership and executive level. The party has taken really a radical drift towards militarism under Elizabeth May's leadership, especially in this past election. The party has completely betrayed its founding values, in my view. There's been huge flip-flops, for example, on the issue of buying fighter jets. Just a few years ago, Elizabeth May had signed a letter with Neil Young and some other well-known people saying Canada doesn't need fighter jets. They reversed that opposition this past election. They called for an increase in troop numbers for the Canadian military. They called for meeting NATO spending targets, building a military base in the Arctic, and really the list goes on and on.
And this is the Green Party.
This is the Green Party, exactly. It's something you would think like the Conservative Party or something, but no, this was the Green Party in the past election. They completely joined into this pro-war narrative.
I was just a member of the NDP for the last 2 years provincially, and I got very involved. And what I found out was that there's a small gang that controls the BC NDP, which is our provincial government here. So this is a powerful group. A small gang controls the BC NDP. They have all the power. They don't give a damn about the membership. And they're protected by the media, who never tells us any of this. They pretend the NDP is kind of a democratic entity. And I've had many forays into the Green Party as well, and I'm sort of seeing the same thing. There's a small group that runs it, and for one reason or another, they have all the power. And the membership, again, I mean, if the membership wants to buy fighter jets, then I would say, okay, we have to agree, we have to accept that that's what the membership wants. But the question is that what the membership wants, or is it what the leadership wants?
Yeah, it's more the leadership. The membership wants to sanction Israel and cut military spending. So,
we're talking about the Green Party of Canada, right? So the membership wants to sanction Israel, but will Elizabeth May do that?
No, and in fact, Elizabeth May threatened to resign when that resolution was adopted by the membership. And also has not been very strong on Palestine. She hasn't used the word genocide to describe the situation that's taking place. And even despite everything we've seen in the last couple of years from the Israeli government, is still not calling for sanctions.
So what's the road forward for the Green Party of Canada? How does it, I mean, my own feeling is we have to democratize the party, simply put the power back, well, maybe not back, but put the power into the hands of the membership. The leadership should not be able to do things that the membership doesn't want, but instead it's the exact opposite.
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest problems that the Green Party faces now is sort of being transformed over the past few years into a bit of a personality cult around Elizabeth May, right? And even when she had stepped down from the leadership in 2019, she openly endorsed a leadership candidate to replace her, Annamie Paul, who ended up doing a horrible job, who was completely unqualified for the position and is basically set up to fail.
It was a disaster for the party.
Complete disaster. And it was a similar situation with Jonathan Pedneau in this election. Both Annamie Paul and Jonathan Pedneau had spent most of their adult lives outside the country, had not really been involved in Canadian politics at all, and came to it with a huge lack of experience and lack of commitment towards the party itself as well. So there's a lot of similarities between those two situations, right? In both cases, those people were handpicked by Elizabeth May, and now that both of them have resigned and gone, well, Elizabeth May presents herself as the only solution to this problem that she has helped create. So in my view, the way to renew the Green Party and give it any chance of survival would be for Elizabeth May to immediately step down from the leadership, and not just that, but to sit as an independent MP rather than with the Green Party, because knowing Elizabeth's personality, it's completely unrealistic to think that she will serve underneath any leader that is not handpicked by her. And even the ones that are handpicked by her, like Annamie Paul, there was a huge amount of friction and confrontation that started right from the get-go. So Elizabeth needs to allow the party to, she needs to allow the party to progress beyond her personality. And so far, she's unwilling.
Yeah. But I will say, for, many good things about Elizabeth May as well. You ran for the leadership of the Green Party of Canada, and I think you got kicked out of the race. Is that
exactly? Yeah, she kicked me out of the race.
Now, okay, she or a group.
Well, I mean, people that she's hiding behind, right?
Yeah. It's a problem. It's a problem. And you were kicked out of the race. Why? Now, you were running for the leadership of the Green Party of Canada when?
Well, I had two campaigns, one in 2020 and one in 2022.
Okay.
The one in 2020, I ended up dropping out, knowing that Elizabeth was supporting a candidate, and also that they had fixed the entry fee for the race at first $50,000, and then they reduced it to $30,000. It was still an astronomical amount of money to raise during the pandemic without in-person campaign events, that sort of thing. Actually, I was doing a cross-Canada tour when the pandemic hit, and I had to cancel the whole Atlantic leg of it and everything.
Right.
So
forgot about the pandemic.
That was unfortunate, But then in 2022, the situation was different, right? The entrance fee was only $1,000. Dimitri Lascaris, the other left-wing figure in the party, said that he was not running. And a lot of his supporters came to me and asked me to run. Of course, this leadership race was scheduled to coincide with the Quebec general election, right? So I was very busy at the time. But I decided to give it a go anyway, right? To run for both the provincial election as leader and then at the same time be running for the federal leadership of the Green Party. But as soon as I started collecting my nomination signatures, the party called me into a meeting and they said that basically my opposition to the war in Ukraine was unacceptable for them. And they were also upset that I had criticized Elizabeth May in the 2019 election for supporting the continued exploitation of the tar sands and the arrival of tar sands oil here in Quebec.
And you were kicked out of the leadership race for the Green Party of Canada.
Not just the leadership race, but the party as well.
Yeah. And remember, you're the head of the Quebec Green Party.
Exactly. Okay. And, the media would have made a huge deal about it if I was kicked out for like Quebec nationalism or wanting to, ban religious symbols from minorities or something like that. But since it was over my opposition to the war in Ukraine, there was relatively little attention paid to it.
Nobody is more corrupt than the media.
Right.
It's
especially on that issue too.
Yeah.
Issue, it's.
I want to move on to your trip to China, but sure. I'll just finish by saying I think it's very dangerous when our political parties, and I think they're all the same, they all do it. When the people at the top, this little gang or group, takes over the party and they have the power to kick somebody out of the race. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have the power, because obviously there can be real problems that arise. But for them to have this power and do it because they disagree with somebody's stance on something as important as, a war between Russia and Ukraine. I mean, this is, and to deny this person, and they denied Dmitry Lascaris the election before. They kicked him out of the race.
Yeah.
So, and the membership doesn't have a voice. So the membership doesn't even get to hear these ideas. It's a big problem, and it's endemic in our country, and we have to deal with it. But let's move on to your trip to China. I think you were invited by the government of China to participate in a trip to China.
Yeah, exactly. The Chinese embassy in Ottawa reached out saying that they were organizing a trip for Canadian media and influencers. So we were a delegation of about 8 people. They took us to 3 different cities, Beijing, Hangzhou, and Qingdao. So we got to do everything from going to arts museums to meeting with officials at the foreign ministry in Beijing. So it was really an excellent trip. The expenses for that portion of the trip were covered by the Chinese government. And so it was a huge honor for me to be able to visit China, a country that I've always wanted to see, and to be able to do it not just as a tourist, but also with, access to people at the foreign ministry and access to meetings about the Canada-China relationship. So it was a very informative experience.
So what did you see?
Well, we saw a lot of high-tech things, right? A lot of electric vehicles. We saw a completely automated port in Qingdao, one of the biggest ports in the world. We saw, the foreign ministry, right? That was politically the most impressive part of the trip, right? But we got to talk about the different hot-button issues between Canada and China. We also saw some historic sites like the Forbidden City, which was the center of power in China for a few hundred years. And I also spent a week on my own after the official portion of the tour, and I explored Shanghai and also the Yellow Mountains.
Okay. What is the homeless situation like in China?
Well, I didn't see any homeless people the whole time, actually. So it's very different compared to Canada. Like when we were talking with our guides and stuff, we were telling them about how, in Canada, you've got these, tent cities kind of everywhere, basically. And, people struggling with drug use on the streets and stuff like that. Well, I didn't see any of that in China. For one, like the drug policy there is much more severe, right? Like there's huge jail sentences for drugs, right? Actually, one of the issues we discussed, the foreign ministry, was that there have been 4 Canadians that were executed for trafficking large amounts of hard drugs into China. So that issue came up. But in terms of homeless, I didn't see any homeless, right? But it doesn't mean that there isn't poverty within China. Like, they've managed to elevate everybody to the sort of a baseline, but that baseline may not be very high, right? And the people are not permitted to sleep in the street, like in the big downtowns of the big cities and that kind of thing. But there can be people that, are struggling to get by, that are maybe living on construction sites, working long hours, and, just like in Canada, right, trying to make some money and get ahead. So there's people there that do that as well, but they're not sleeping out in the street in the big cities the way that we see in Canada.
Yeah. Yeah. And we should keep that in mind. I mean, if we have it in Canada, I think it's only because the people who run things want us to have it. China has 1.4 billion people, and from what I've heard, they don't have a problem with home. In fact, they've got ghost cities.
Yeah, that's it. Well, they're good at building infrastructure too. And at one point, actually, in Shanghai, I went for a walk sort of away from the downtown core, and there were some buildings that looked like a little bit run down and people were living in them. But then right across the street, it seemed like there was buildings from the same development that were being completely refurbished, right? So it's like, yeah, okay, there was some bad buildings that run down, but they were probably next on the list to be refurbished. So there's that's a little bit different. And, the distribution of wealth is probably a little bit more equal over in China, right? Like, capitalism requires a certain amount of homelessness, like, for people to motivate people to work and to not end up in the street themselves and everything. So,
and to push up rents and push up prices because you got a shortage of housing.
Yeah. It's a cornerstone of capitalism to have homelessness. So,
yeah. And what a crime that is. What a crime that is, that we live in a country and are powerless to do anything about it, because basically the people making money off the homeless and the housing crisis, the whole housing crisis, they have all the power. And we don't even, people don't even know what's being done to us. They do it so well.
Yeah.
How about public transit?
Well, it's very, very well developed. Shanghai is the 3rd biggest city in the world, right? It's got 25 million people. So they've got a subway system with 18 different lines running through the city. And a few of the stations that I went to, they had 20 different exits.
Yeah,
so, it's like an airport, like just a metro station, kind of like an airport, with 3 different lines going to it and all these exits and all of these, underground shopping malls attached and stuff like that. So that was impressive. Also,
does the system work?
I would say it works. Yeah. It's, the entry is on your phone, right? So everybody uses the WeChat app. So you scan it when you go in, you scan it when you leave. There's a lot of security. They X-ray bags when you go in to the subway.
Wow.
And in terms of getting between cities, they've also got high-speed trains that run at over 200 kilometers an hour. They go far off into the countryside and that kind of thing, and they're affordable to use. Unlike Via Rail in Canada, can be often very expensive. So there's that. But
lots of cars as well.
Definitely lots of cars, right? Traffic jams, that kind of thing. The cars are more and more electric, so I didn't experience any like smog or like really problematic air pollution while I was there. So that's, a big improvement from some of the images we've seen of Beijing from 30 years ago with full of smog and everything. It's not really the case anymore. But then again, the weather conditions on certain days can be better than others. So I don't know what it's like the entire year.
And Canada-China relations, my own feeling about that is, why can't we be friends with China? Now, it's interesting, a lot of charges have been made against China over the past several years. I think it's an attempt, again, by the people who really run Canada to just give us another enemy. But maybe what they're saying is true. Maybe China is, along with other countries, India and Russia, undermining our democracy. And, cheating on our elections. Those are the allegations. Although interestingly, they're never called allegations. When it's about China, it's just true, because
Right.
we're told that by CSIS,
Yeah.
who nobody should trust, and the RCMP, who,
Right.
I
And
mean, I got nothing
nobody's been
against.
found guilty in a court of that.
Exactly. It's
Right.
all media allegations or lies or half-truths with CSIS. And so, what they've done over the last couple of years is they've created for us another enemy. Why do we want China to be our enemy if we don't have to have that?
Yeah, it's complete insanity, I think, honestly. Like if you actually look into each one of those allegations that they make, they're unsubstantiated. They'll use things like, oh, there was a question and answer period with a candidate and somebody came with a Mandarin accent and asked a question about having good relations with China. And oh my God, foreign interference. Or there'll be some posts on like the WeChat social media where Chinese Canadians are discussing the Canadian election and the Canada-China relationship as it relates to the election, and they'll say, "Oh, it's foreign interference." There couldn't be that many likes on this post without, state-sponsored foreign interference. Like this kind of stuff is pretty far out there in terms of conspiracy theories, but it's endorsed by the government agencies like CSIS and RCMP,
And the media,
and the
who
media as
push it
well.
100% without a
Yeah.
question. Of course,
Exactly.
that's their
And
job.
even Justin Trudeau at one point tried to say, look, we've looked into these allegations of Chinese foreign interference and they're unsubstantiated. And the media would not accept it, and they started saying, oh, you're the Chinese agent now. So Trudeau had to go up to Xi Jinping and scold him in the middle of an international summit about interfering in the Canadian elections, despite the fact that it's not proven. And even Trudeau himself said that the whole thing was overblown just previously. So those are big problems with the relationship, right? And I discussed that with the officials there. But back to your question about why is it like this? Well, it's Canada searching for an enemy, right? And searching to have some sort of a confrontation with China. That Canada has sent military aircraft and ships to go and challenge Chinese sovereignty over the Strait of Taiwan. And they've done this with CBC journalists on board. And when the boats and the aircraft get intercepted, well, the journalists say, oh, well, look how aggressive they are. Look, the Chinese military is so aggressive with us and everything. Well, what do you think you're doing? You're on the other side of the world challenging the sovereignty of another country, and you're surprised that you're going to be intercepted by an aircraft? Like, what if China was doing that off of the coast of Vancouver Island, for example? I think that Canada would probably send a boat to go and meet them. So anyway, these things are about getting the Canadian population ready for an eventual conflict with China that may or may not happen in the future. And the Chinese interference narrative is just one of many tools to build public consent for potential future confrontation.
Yeah. While our real enemy is the very corporations who own the media that are telling us the story about China. And once again, I'll just finish this off by saying, if the allegations are true, then clearly we have to do something about it. But can we not have some proof? Can we not have a court case? Can we not? They just tell us, and that becomes the official story. It's very dangerous, folks, when we trust a corporate-owned media that does not deserve anybody's trust for many, many reasons.
Yeah.
Our third topic is going to be, I guess, the current situation in Canada, and I'd like to start by asking. Maybe you know nothing about this, but it was something the Trudeau government did that really surprised me because I agreed with it. It was. They were going to raise the capital gains tax a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was surprised they did that because they got hammered by everybody, the media, for doing it. And I'm surprised that the Liberal Party did this because I always think they're totally for the rich and powerful. Do you have any idea why that was done?
Well, I think that the Liberal Party stepped to the right, to undermine the Conservatives. So first thing Mark Carney did when he got in was to cancel the capital gains tax increase, cancel the carbon tax, carry on the message about military spending and confrontation.
But do you have any idea why the Trudeau government was seemingly going to raise capital gains taxes.
What was a minimal increase, right? It was
Yeah, it
mostly,
was fairly, it was, I mean, it was going after the people at the very top. I mean, it's the very, very wealthy who make most of their money from capital gains, and they get a break. I mean, nobody in Canada even knows this because it's never talked about, but
yeah. But
capital
then
gains,
that
yeah,
too, it said, were they really going to do it? Or were they going to say they're going to do it and then cancel at the last moment
yeah.
and say, oh, look, now we did a
Was
tax
there
cut?
pressure from within the party, the rank and file of the party, to do it, or do you have any idea?
I think that it was an interesting talking point for them, but it was
Yeah,
something that they knew the whole time they could easily walk back from,
yeah.
so.
So we've had an election. If you, we could maybe comment on the impact on our election if we had proportional representation. It would have been a completely different election. I think the Green Party uh, would have gotten probably 10% of the vote in a proportional representation election. Do you think so?
Well, it's hard to say, right? Because
Yeah.
if there was proportional representation, you'd have immediately like an explosion in the number of small parties.
Yes.
So it's not just like, okay, there'll be a proportional rep election and the Green Party would be the only small party. And like, it would be a complete upset of the entire political system to go to direct proportional representation. So it's a bit of a hypothetical. It's hard to predict, right? But now the Green Party, I think, got 1.2%. So it would be maybe 4 MPs that they would get instead of one.
Yeah.
But it would be a minority government. And I think
Which it
that,
is.
yeah, that's it.
It is
It is, right? Yeah.
amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what's your take on the Carney government, on our relationship with the United States, on the fact that more and more Canadians can barely afford to eat?
Yeah. Well, with the United States, I'm a little bit relieved there that Trump, I watched the exchange that he had with Mark Carney. And what struck me about that is that Trump is completely distracted on other issues there and that Canada is not really a priority and that, they're going to close the trade war eventually. And there's still a talk of annexation, but it's not nearly as aggressive as it was before. Like, it's not like we're going to crush your economy if you don't join us. It's more of a friendly invitation that's been declined. So I think that meeting went pretty well for Canada. Carney only talked for 3 minutes, made a couple of jokes, and that was basically it there. So that's a bit of a relief, But it doesn't mean that Canada shouldn't continue to, diversify the trading relationships and stuff like that. Maybe become a little bit less dependent on the United States, and maybe exercise our sovereignty on certain issues and give ourselves a reason to have a state, to have a
Well,
real country rather than just be a state of the United States. Like, let's build Canada into something that's different from them.
yeah, and what I noticed Canada-wide from virtually every top politician, when the tariffs were brought in or not brought in, I mean, it was just the first, they're going to be this, they're going to be that, changing every day, total chaos. The reaction here in BC by our provincial government was, well, tariffs. This means we don't have time for environmental reviews of anything anymore. We just have to push ahead with every mining and oil and gas and logging. We have to do that. That's what we have. This is an NDP government here in BC, right?
Yeah.
And that was the message. The message from the media and from all our politicians was not, okay, here's a defining moment. We're being moved away from the United States. Why don't we look at our whole society and try to figure out, is this corporate industrial state that we're not only in, but it's getting more and more and more, is that where we want to go? Or would we like to maybe do something else as a nation? Can we talk about that? But no, we cannot talk about that. It was gung-ho on, and the guy who Carney put in charge of natural resources is no joke.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. It's kind of a, disaster capitalism kind of approach, right? Where you say, okay, now the economy is going to be destroyed by these tariffs. So as you mentioned, let's do everything. Let's gut the environmental assessment rules and just roll forward with all this stuff. Especially unfortunate, given that Canada doesn't really take much royalties from natural resources in general, right? It's mostly like giving them away to corporations for free and hoping that there's a few jobs and stuff like that.
To compare Norway and Canada and Alberta, I mean, Norway has somewhere like $1 trillion. And in Canada, we're a wreck because the Norwegian government, I think, actually works for the people of Norway. And in part, that's because they do have a proportional voting system, which does give people a little more power, I think.
Yeah. Well, they seem to work for the people in China as well. They don't even have a voting system. So,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Yeah, what's the system there with democracy? Is there
Well,
any?
there's no democracy over there. It's a single party rule, but from what I hear, it is possible to get ideas, like good ideas, work their way up the chain, maybe a little bit quicker when it's not politicized, right? And you don't have like a new government coming in after 4 years and looking to undo all the progress that was made by the previous one. So there's pros and cons to each
Yeah.
system, right?
I know many, well, it must probably 20 years back when they built the huge Three Gorges Dam, I believe the biggest dam project ever in the world. They moved something like 2 million people. Was it something like that? I mean,
I'm
they
not
just,
familiar with that project,
yeah,
but
yeah. I
yeah.
think it was something like 2 million people. They just forced them off. So, I mean, personally, I don't want any of our governments to have that kind of power. So,
Yeah.
that's why I believe in democracy, meaning that people have to have the power. It would be a different world if we had some voice.
Yeah.
Anyways, Alex, our time is almost up. Any last comments you'd like to make about the Green Party or your trip to China or the situation in Canada right now?
Just that, to sum up all those points, the Canadian left, we need to up our game, right? We need to be better represented in Canadian politics. The Mark Carney's leadership gives people a chance to mobilize. He's a relatively somewhat blank state. I mean, he's probably a billionaire and, there's a lot of problems with who he is and everything, but I think that he would be sensitive to pressure from the streets if people mobilize enough. And I think there's potential to rebuild both the Green Party and the NDP if left-wing people take the time and put the effort to do so rather than sort of leaving it in the hands of the evil forces, we could say. So I encourage everybody to get involved, to protest in the streets, to join parties, to see what can be done. And with respect to China, I think that Canada, we need to reinforce our peace movement. We have to be able to counter these pro-war narratives that are being fed to us by the politicians and also from the media. And I think that more dialogue between opposing sides by bypassing the politicians can lead to a lot of positivity. So people should feel inspired, I think, to go out and protest for peace. World peace is an achievable objective. We can't lose sight of that. And it's only going to happen if people stand for it.
You mentioned one thing I'd like to comment on. You said join parties, and
Yeah.
that's something I always push too. I think everybody should join the political party of their choice, whatever that may be, and work together with others to democratize the party. The parties do exist. They have a lot of power. And unfortunately, that power has been taken over by small gangs of people who do not work in the public interest. But the opportunity is there for people to join their favorite political party and just work together to make the party democratic so that the members have at least some control of the party. Because right now, all the power is at the top that is undemocratic, and just look around. It's not working.
Yeah. But it's also about getting left-wing people to the top, right?
No, not to me. To me, it's getting the people to the top who the members want, whoever that may be.
Right.
Yeah. Alex, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Thanks for the invitation there. It's always a pleasure to discuss, and I wish you best of luck with the success in your podcast, and I hope we can chat again soon.
And thanks everybody for watching this segment of From Canada Citizens Forum.